In the rolling hills of southwestern Spain, beneath the canopies of centuries-old home oaks, something extraordinary takes shape. It's not a crop, nor a commodity. It's a living system, a choreography of landscape, genetics, tradition, and precision. Here, black Iberian pigs roam freely across dehesas, vast silvopastoral ecosystems where forestry and grazing exist in symbiosis. But they're not just wandering. Every acorn consumed, every kilometer walked, is part of a quiet formula, one that shapes the flavor profile of the world's most valuable cured meat, Jamón Ibérico de Bellota. These pigs are the last heirs of an ancient genetic line, uniquely capable of metabolizing acorn fats into intramuscular oleic acid, the same heart-healthy lipid found in extra virgin olive oil. Their meat isn't just marbled, it's sculpted by nature and refined by time. For each animal, the process begins with 2 years of controlled feeding and ends with over 36 months of slow curing, sometimes in natural stone cellars that mimic mountain climates. But this is more than biology. This is agroforestry turned into art, supported by drone-mapped acorn yields, biometric monitoring collars, and soil moisture sensors that ensure oak tree productivity remains viable year after year. And yet, the marvel doesn't end in the forest. Because while the pigs may live in pastoral silence, the ham they produce must move through a hyper-regulated, high-value cold chain spanning thousands of kilometers. It's a product so delicate, so bound to environmental fidelity, that even a small deviation in humidity, altitude, or temperature can shift its flavor. That's why exporters today are less like traditional shippers and more like preservation engineers, ensuring that a $4,500 leg of ham arrives in Tokyo or Dubai, tasting as if it had never left Extremadura. This is food logistics at its most intricate. This is the precision agriculture of taste. And every step of the journey, from acorn to altitude, from cell biology to customs protocols, is part of a system designed not just to transport, but to protect flavor as cultural heritage. Now, imagine the logistics behind that. Because when tradition becomes a global product, engineering becomes invisible, but essential. The first export decision isn't made at the port. It's made beneath the oak trees. The flavor of Jamón Ibérico begins with the density and maturity of acorns, a variable that changes by the hectare, by the year, by the tree. To manage that complexity, producers now deploy aerial mapping drones equipped with multispectral imaging. These systems calculate acorn yield per tree crown and identify shaded zones where pigs forage less efficiently. The goal: precision feeding in an open environment. Not forced, not mechanized, but orchestrated. Because a single month of poor acorn distribution can alter the lipid profile that defines the ham's premium classification. On the ground, each pig wears a GPS-linked biometric collar, logging its steps, heart rate, and caloric expenditure. These aren't tracking devices. They're metabolic instruments, measuring not only how far the pig walks, but how well it converts mobility into intramuscular fat. Walk too little, and the ham lacks aroma complexity. Walk too much without sufficient acorn intake, and the animal loses weight instead of marbling. The balance is delicate, and it's monitored in real time through agro-intelligent dashboards that combine soil moisture, tree productivity, and animal movement into a single visual field, a map not of terrain, but of flavor potential. Curing begins where the forest ends. In traditional cellars and modern climate-controlled drying chambers, each ham starts a long transformation, slow dehydration, enzymatic breakdown, and fat diffusion. But these chambers are no longer passive. Sensors placed at different heights detect microcurrents of humidity and adjust window apertures or airflow ducts automatically. Some facilities now use AI-controlled ventilation zones, moving hams between altitudes, temperatures, and airspeeds to replicate ideal seasonal progressions. The aim: simulate nature, but without its unpredictability. One exporter uses ceramic-coated tiles embedded with smart humidity modules. part of a blockchain-secured monitoring system that logs environmental data directly to the ham's individual traceability record. That record begins in the forest and ends with a QR code on the final packaging. Every atmospheric shift, every curing milestone, becomes part of a transparent archive, not just for regulation, but for sensorial integrity. Because in this business, taste is not a promise. It's a dataset, and it must travel intact. Transporting jamón ibérico de Bellota isn't simply about preservation. It's about sustaining a living flavor, a balance of oleic fats, amino acids, and aged aromatic compounds that continue evolving even after curing is complete. The challenge lies not in freezing or chilling the product, but in keeping it within a narrow thermal corridor between 16.5 and 18 degrees Celsius. No more, no less. Deviate slightly, and the ham's oil sheen may turn cloudy, its aroma muted, or its texture compromised. For a product whose value can exceed $250 per kilogram, that risk is never theoretical. This is where thermal logistics becomes a form of precision engineering. Export-grade hams are vacuum-sealed in multi-layer oxygen-impermeable films. But the real innovation lies in the logistics units themselves. In premium lanes, shipments are stored inside dedicated climate pods, often subdivided into independent compartments with separate thermostatic regulation. These units operate on algorithms that adjust cooling, not by air temperature alone, but by surface energy retention curves, ensuring that internal ham temperature lags behind ambient changes in a controlled rhythm. Some companies integrate RFID-sealed pressure indicators within the packaging. If even a minute drop in vacuum is detected, due to altitude shifts or seal microfractures, the package is instantly flagged for sensory inspection. One breach is enough to disqualify a ham from the highest classification tier. In customs warehouses, especially in subtropical transit zones, this control becomes critical. In one notable case, a Japanese importer lost over $160,000 in product during a 14-hour heat delay at an international hub. Since then, they've implemented phase change buffer packs, gels engineered to maintain microclimatic equilibrium during unforeseen holds, independent of external power. The journey is simulated before it begins. Exporters subject each batch to vibration platforms, pressure chambers, and variable temperature tunnels that replicate transatlantic flights, last-mile trucking, and warehouse conditions. These simulations aren't regulatory formalities. They are predictive safeguards. They ensure that once the ham leaves the cellar, its sensory integrity survives shock, lift, and time zone. It's not enough to deliver the product intact. The mission is to deliver it unchanged, as if Extremadura itself had traveled with it. Before we move on to what happens when this ham reaches the other side of the world, here's something worth your attention. If the idea of precision, tradition, and value working together fascinates you, just like the systems behind this ham, take a second to check the pinned comment. There's something there crafted with the same care for detail. A cured ham is often perceived as static, a final product, passive in its perfection, simply waiting to be sliced. But jamón ibérico de Bellota, especially at the highest levels of quality, is not static. It is biologically active, chemically sensitive, and structurally evolving. Even after curing, it continues to breathe, release moisture, and shift its internal balance of enzymes, fats, and aromas. Its preservation, therefore, is not about keeping it cold. It's about preserving the conditions of a microclimate that no longer exists. The drying rooms of Andalusia, the rhythms of the Montanera, the interplay of salt and air over time. And when this ham leaves its birthplace, the challenge begins. Not to freeze it in time, but to carry its terroir across oceans. For exporters, this requires a hybrid knowledge that bridges agricultural science, materials engineering, and logistical design. The goal is not merely to arrive, but to arrive with identity intact. That identity is fragile. It resides in the soft luster of marbled fat, the nutty sweetness that lingers in the mouth, the thin layer of oil that coats a perfectly sliced piece at room temperature. These aren't just subjective qualities. They are measurable chemical realities affected by temperature swings, pressure drops, and even atmospheric oxygen levels during flight. That's why elite exporters are no longer treating ham as a food product, but as a sensitive biological artifact. One Spanish logistics firm, working exclusively with gourmet cured meats, has developed a predictive freshness model using historical, barometric, and thermal data from 11 major international flight paths. This model doesn't just calculate ETA, it analyzes the expected cabin pressure fluctuations, likelihood of delay, based on seasonal storm activity and variance in ambient tarmac heat exposure during cargo handling. Based on this, it selects a route that offers the best chance of aromatic preservation, even if it's not the fastest or cheapest. This shift in thinking, from transport to curated transfer, has also affected packaging design. Traditional vacuum sealing has evolved into a multi-layer system, often including oxygen-absorbing inner films, light-reflective exteriors, and embedded sensors that track pressure, temperature, and orientation in real time. These aren't gadgets. They are instruments of assurance. If the ham's position in the crate shifts during air turbulence, if the ambient humidity inside the cargo bay exceeds acceptable thresholds, or if the crate remains stationary on a heated runway longer than expected, the system logs it. And in some advanced cases, it reacts. Enter AI-augmented cargo crates. These units are equipped with internal accelerometers, gyroscopic stabilizers, and cloud-linked alert systems. If a crate registers excessive vibration during loading or detects a power failure in a refrigeration unit, it can trigger rerouting protocols. In practical terms, this means that a shipment intended for Singapore might be held in Frankfurt if conditions compromise the ham's organoleptic forecast. While it waits, a controlled chamber maintains ideal storage conditions, and real-time dashboards alert the importer. No human intervention is required unless quality standards demand it. In this sense, the crate isn't just carrying the ham, it's defending it. But defense is only part of the story. What's emerging in this industry is a form of proactive logistics, where environmental conditions aren't merely monitored, but anticipated. Some exporters now run virtual twin simulations of each shipment before departure. These simulations input every variable, from cargo load density and pallet orientation to predicted headwind patterns over the Atlantic, and run the route virtually to identify risk points. The ham that leaves the cellar does so only after its journey has been mapped at the molecular level. At the same time, upstream decisions are being influenced by downstream realities. Take slicing, for instance. Slicing changes everything. A whole ham is robust in transport, but once sliced, its exposure to oxygen accelerates oxidation and alters mouthfeel within hours. That's why many shipments include a dual component: whole hams for cellaring at destination, and pre-sliced, gas-flushed packs for immediate service. These packs are prepared in controlled atmosphere rooms, using nitrogen or CO2 to displace oxygen and preserve texture and color without chemical preservatives. It's not just presentation, it's aromatic timing, ensuring that the moment the package is opened in a Michelin-starred kitchen in Tokyo, the ham performs as intended. And still, the chain isn't complete. At the final link, retail or culinary presentation, technology continues to play a role. High-end retailers now integrate near-field communication tags, NFC on packaging, allowing chefs and consumers to scan and access the ham's journey data, feeding patterns of the animal, atmospheric curing logs, transportation conditions, and even suggested wine pairings based on batch-specific flavor profiles. What was once an artisanal product is now also a narrative product, where logistics builds not just trust, but storytelling. Yet for all this sophistication, the mission remains profoundly human. A cured ham doesn't move through a system, it moves through a chain of care, each link representing a person or technology dedicated to preserving its essence. From the oak trees that must not be overgrazed, to the curing masters who test humidity with their fingertips, to the software engineers writing algorithms that safeguard flavor in transit. Each role is part of a quiet orchestration. And like all great orchestras, its beauty lies not just in individual brilliance, but in synchronization. So when the crate is opened and the first slice is cut, what unfolds is more than taste. It's infrastructure, biology, and legacy converging on a plate. It's the logic of engineering, applied not to speed or volume, but to preservation of identity. It's a reminder that in a world obsessed with fast consumption, some things still move at the speed of care. And for a product born of patience, of trees and time and tradition, perhaps that's the most advanced system of all. And if you've come this far, it means you're someone who appreciates the invisible systems that keep the world running. So here's a simple curiosity. Take a moment and check the pinned comment. It's not about ham logistics or agroforestry, but it might surprise you all the same.